everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And I am just really, really thrilled to have one of my long-term friends and former law school classmates. Oh my gosh, we go way back, Whiting Dimock. She is on here. We've been kind of just like living in a parallel universe out there in the world for some time. And I've been wanting to get her on and she's just been hard to really get a hold of it, grab and be like, come here with me. So Whiting, I'm really grateful for you that you actually are sitting down with me today. Welcome.
Thank you, Heather. It's an honor. Appreciate it.
Tell our listeners right now, like, where are you right now in your leadership journey? Where do you see that journey? Where are you at?
So as you know, we graduated from law school 25 years ago. And
Thanks for dating us.
You know, I own every year is what I always say. So I started in a big law firm setting and then spent a few years, 4 years in a corporate setting, so commercial real estate company, then switched onto the people side of the law business really. And more than 11 years ago, came back to Boulder to work at CU as the Dean of Students. And then I'm just actually transitioning in January out of that and starting a law firm with my partner. So that's where I'm at.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. That's a lot going on. And it's just a lot of you have done a lot of interesting roles too since law school. I mean, it's like, going to, and it's as you recall it from me before we went live, it's like this, and I have too. I mean, it's just like the road we go, it's like, but you did a more of a traditional track out of school with going to the big law firms, doing all these different, law firm management and all of that. And then getting to the point where you're like, well, I'm not quite sure, like, this is exactly where I should be at this moment. And then you go to the route you're at now, and then where you're going next. And so it's just so interesting how things ebb and flow, and where we're supposed to be changes so much depending. And I think if we're listening, internally to ourselves, which is necessary, right? Then it does change a lot. So, oh gosh. Well, I am curious to know, where does your drive to lead come from? And I mean this even in the most general sense, like the law firm management stuff, the leading students at the law school from an emotional perspective, a supportive perspective, guidance perspective. Where does that drive to lead come from?
I think, in some ways I probably don't know. I will say that I have always found it tremendously gratifying to help people navigate situations that maybe don't need to be as hard as they are, right? And so often we find, law school is a perfect example of where it feels like there are all these unwritten rules and expectations and all these things, when I was things like the hiring process for large firms, like I didn't know why people were wearing suits. And so some of these things where I figured out how things work, got some, knowledge. I really enjoy sharing that with people. I really love helping people with problems. And I think that's the theme too. So it's not, I don't think I'm so much, I've never thought of it as really motivated to lead so much as motivated to help people. And then it's almost involuntary that when things don't make sense to me, I can't really be quiet about it.
And I'm the same way. I always tell people, like, the lawyer never leaves you. Like that whole, like, fighting for justice, like doing the right thing, just pinpointing what's wrong. And I mean, that thing never leaves you. You can try to run, because believe me, I have run for years and years, and it is still there. And so in the work I do now, and the whole, employee advocate type of stuff I do, right? It really is. It boils down to what's being done that's not just, that's not right.
Yeah.
And how I see my role. And it's just interesting, again, how we find our voices, in those moments as well.
Yeah. And I guess I would say an important part of the motivation too is just the, wanting to, for a lot of us just a lot of us, right, is like, you want to change your circumstances, right? And so some of it is like, I want to have, I want to have financial security. I want to have independence. I want to have I want to have agency, really. And I think that's, that's a big part of the journey in leadership too.
How do you think people who either reported to you or just like who spend quite a bit of time around you, particularly in the workplace, what do you think they'd say about your leadership style?
I think so, and I'll actually just paraphrase what folks have said, which is, needless to say, when you work with law students, you get a lot of feedback along the way, which is really, really wonderful. So I would say people, some of the most heartwarming things I've heard are that I hold space for people, I listen well, and I um, preserve people's dignity when they're telling me about things that have gone wrong. I really strive to honor their dignity, people's dignity, when they're trusting me with their problems. I think, I think some folks on the maybe less heartwarming side, some of the weaknesses, I think I take on too much, right? And so then, I do that terrible thing of not meaning to, but overpromise, underdeliver. I think, and then one that is, there are so many things that have two sides to them, right? Or two different views. So, some people love that I will advocate for students, and some people don't love that I advocate for students. So
That's the reason why I have you on here. I think we're made from the same cloth, and it's so interesting because I mean I knew way back when it was a tough time for me to in law school that you were a kind person, but as I listen to you now, I'm like, ooh, we are more alike than
yeah,
yeah thought.
I appreciate. I take that as a huge compliment. Thank you.
Thanks. But that whole like doing too much, absolutely, like way overdoing it, and then being like worn down and being like curmudgeon about it a little bit,
Yeah,
and then the idea of like really advocating, like sometimes it's like over advocation. And then it's like, well, can you be someone who's more neutral in this moment? I would never, I thought I'd be good as a judge or something, but at this point, I think I'd be
yeah,
having an opinion one way and it'd be hard to keep it, how to not have that. And so, yeah, I can see how that would be hard because you're so good at your job with the listening and the making sure you're there to support the students, and they're probably staying there partly because of you and your level of support. Like they're in it because of that. Like when we think about leadership a lot, there are lines that have to be drawn for sure. I don't think the lines are as hard and fast as most people think leadership needs to be as it relates to connectivity, connection, transparency, vulnerability. But I
mm-hmm.
think there is in fact a line I've discovered because I didn't used to realize there was a line and I would cross it a lot in my leadership journey. And so understanding like there's a certain level of support you provide, there's a certain level of like hard and fastness or like, clarity of expectations that have to be set and holding people accountable for certain behaviors that have to be set. Instead of full on just like advocacy, support. It's like, okay, but let me draw the line because actually let's back up. Now, what role do you play? So it's like trying to be that impartial person in the moment, not getting so emotionally tied into it. I don't know about you, Whiting, but for me, over being that kind of person who's an empath to a large extent,
Mm-hmm.
um, early on. So I would say not even early on, probably up until 10 years ago, I was not the best at separating the emotions of other people from what I needed to feel. So like I would just feel things so deeply. And then it would be hard for me to get out of my own way because I'd be trying to support someone, but I would actually end up hurting me and them through the level of support I provided. I don't know if you had that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly what you're saying is really important and true. And I think the piece too with in as the dean of students at the law school, where you're preparing students for the legal profession. So unlike every other school at CU, we have no undergraduate students, right? It's all students who are preparing for the legal profession. And so there is this piece of, you know, listening, being empathic, and also helping them navigate the legal profession versus navigating for them. And so, and that's a really, it's not a, it's not, it's not something that everybody sees in the same way or understands. And I think it is part of this, like, you don't prepare people well for the legal profession if law school were like the happiest, cuddliest kindergarten classroom, like that's not preparation for the profession. And also it doesn't have to be. So figuring out like what's, the one of the concepts, and this actually is from my therapist, but like supporting people in holding themselves accountable versus, versus it being like our responsibility to do things for them, or our responsibility even to hold them accountable. So some of it is really like having, I think some of what is implied in what you're saying is this, what's my responsibility? What's the other person's responsibility? And we don't get, I do think many of us have to learn that as adults.
Yeah, like I said, it took me until I got to the 40, and that's pretty
Yeah.
bad, but it's took me that long, and I have 4 children. So I think they are the ones who taught me a lot of this, because you just you just get drugged down in the moment. I feel like for me, I'd be dragged. I'd just be like motion. I'd be just like in a pit of like, if I really let because I have to listen to, I try to listen to each of them equally, right?
Yeah.
It's a conflict, right? And there's 4 of them. So then one of them is going to be the one that takes most, and then the other ones notice it. So that as I'm sitting with them, though, I have to be fully present. This is the same thing, no matter where we're leading or who we're leading. It's that fully presence thing. And then, but it used to be I would jump immediately in, and they would say, so today they'll still say, oh, mom, don't tell mom something. You tell her something, she's going to jump. Well, it's like, well, I only jump if I've heard it multiple times and I'm feeling like either I'm kind of sick of hearing it and I can more easily do it and be done, or I've tried to work with you and like coached you, or I've said things and maybe this is out of your control. Maybe it's something I actually have to take the lead on. So I try to decipher it, but it's taken so, I mean, it's amazing how it's taken so long for me personally to decipher when those times are, when I need to say, okay, and
Yeah.
I'm not perfect at it. I'm not perfect at it. Right. I'm a work in progress, like every single person out
Mm-hmm.
there. Right. It's
Mm-hmm.
just
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
So I'd like for you to recall for a time when it could be something recent, it could be something way longer, whatever, but a time when maybe were not the best leader. Maybe you didn't feel like you showed up as your best self. What did that look like? And then what did you do to come out of it? Or like, how did you try to evolve from there?
A terrific question. And I think really like can kind of give the same answer for lots of different jobs, because it's more about me than about any of the jobs, other than the fact that every job has involved helping people with problems. And I think it's we, many of us have learned that hard work, nose to the grindstone, like all those things, like, don't, all the no pain, no gain, these things, but this like this nonstop push yourself. I think we think that that is the only way to succeed. Certainly the legal profession rewards that. And in some ways, all of our all of our, so much of our culture, I would say, like our economy rewards that kind of like grind, that nonstop grind. We really idolize that. And I would say that I would say that the theme, like the most common mistake and thing where I feel, most common thing where I just feel I don't feel good about how I'm showing up is when I have done some combination of wearing myself down or not. I think we really, or at least I don't, I'll just speak for myself. I think I have had to learn to distinguish between like individual employee problems versus systemic problems. And so I think I will feel awful about what I'm not getting to. And because I'll feel awful, I'm being very, very critical of myself. I'll be more critical of others for what they aren't doing. And I think some of this is, it has only happened working in organizations and systems where there is, there is an equilibrium between staffing and responsibilities and needs. So I think, I have felt pressed to, that I'm not keeping up, and then like frustrated that other people are making things harder by not, and I think I just have been learning over the last few years to really shift to you have to really kind of back to basics, like, take care of yourself. And um, that if you're focused on, I think also a lot of us are trained not to even know what our needs are, right? I don't know how old I was when I heard the concept of an emotional need, but it was probably like not quite today years old, but it was maybe, 2 years ago or something. And so, when you haven't even thought about that, it's like a muscle that has never developed, right? So trying to
Mhm.
figure out what your needs are, how to get your needs met so that you can show up in a way that really, where you really feel like you're being, and this is coming from a Dr. Gabor Mate, but like in authenticity with ourselves so we can be authentic with others, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
would,
it's like that level of honesty. Mhm.
yeah, I would say that's what I have learned is, and keep having to learn, like it is, the answer is almost always to slow down and turn inward rather than grinding more.
It's why it's the first chapter of my book, The Art of Caring Leadership, and it's the biggest chapter, and it's on self-leadership.
Oh.
If you're not turning it, if you're not willing to go in the mirror, if you're not willing to turn it inward, I mean, we aren't going to be effective. It doesn't matter how high you go in an organization, doesn't matter what your title is. It just doesn't, if you can't take care of you. When we think about these last almost 2 years, it's kind of crazy. Um, Mental health, emotional well-being, all of these issues have come to the forefront because there was so much. We all have, to a large extent, experienced a lot of trauma. I mean, all of us, because whether we were, we had friends around, we watched way too much news. It was in our immediate family. There was illness, there was death, there was racial unrest, there was, oh my goodness, there was so much going on. And as we reflect on that, I mean, I myself, I think about the very first few months of the pandemic. My business is almost wholly, well, was not now, but it was almost wholly all in person. I'd be consulting in person, I'd be speaking in person, I'd be training in person, and everything stopped. And fear took hold. And it was like, what is happening? What's going to, and then I went to drinking wine, and then I went to eating cookies. And then it was like all this emotional stuff, even just for me, who's a fairly strong person, but and I've had history of anxiety. So I've had some of these things here and there throughout my life. Um, and so thinking that through, but then all of the trauma I've experienced as I listen to employees in listening sessions, as I read comments on these engagement surveys, these DEI surveys over these last couple of years, and just all the interactions, I'm just like, there is just a lot of pain. There was already a lot of pain, by the way, pre-pandemic, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pain because people weren't being heard, people weren't
Mm-hmm.
being valued, they weren't being listened to, they weren't being respected, right? They just weren't, particularly in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
But just overall, like we just are so busy with this and we're so busy with everything else other than connection. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious for you, like, in the role you've played over these last few years in law school, students, like, how has this impacted you? How has this impacted your students? Like, what's just been your experience as it relates to emotional well-being and the mental health crisis that is huge, huge right now? I mean, there are like months, like 4 to 10 month waiting lists to get into therapists and psychiatrists and group therapy because it is that bad.
Yeah, there for a lot of the time in the last year and a half, there haven't been any beds in pediatric inpatient facilities too. And so yeah, so that's I could say a lot about that question. So in my role as dean of students at the law school, ended up being trusted with the experiences of hundreds of students and the difficult things that were happening. And nobody had just one hard thing happening. And so it might be, one of the um, the mitigation efforts that we made to have avoid the spread of COVID meant that there, for a lot of the time, students, for the most part, everybody was remote, right? So this isolation, and especially, isolation is, the impact is different depending on your support system, your identity, your preferences. So for some folks, moved to Colorado to go to law school and then were isolated, so didn't meet anybody in person, or so. And then, online school is other than, I would say, very, of my experience, a very small subset of people. Like online school it is it's harder for most people. It's exceptionally hard depending on how your brain works. And so students where, they had never had trouble paying attention, but paying attention to a screen is completely different. So, and then, the folks whose families, loved ones were impacted by death, by COVID, by illness, by financial distress, right? So people's, you appreciate your candor there, like people losing jobs, people's so they're just, every and every every type of stressor, and it really, yeah, our identities, our support systems all affect, affect us. And so I'm getting a bit caught up thinking about some of the individual students, but it was, it was everything from, I am people who'd never had mental health challenges having mental health challenges. There, of course, we have a society that rewards self-reliance, right? And then we have a legal profession where I would say it's reduced, but historically there's been a huge stigma associated with saying anything about your own mental health, right? So I think this, I would say one of the good part for me, like the rewarding part, is being able to provide some validation and encouragement and some resources for students who are experiencing, some new trauma. And then of course the uh, our our country's history is based on violence, right? Like it is based on violence. It is based on violence based on race identity in so many ways. And I think lots of folks, I think that just came to the forefront in a way that for some people was a reminder, like, of course, and very personal. And I think there just no, there just was, we all were forced to slow down and think more about things, think differently about things. We couldn't use busyness to keep ourselves from having to think about things. And so I think lots of hard work around identity and, yeah, facing, working through past trauma, things like that. So yeah, I think it was, I guess my quick summary for last year would be just like, it was really an honor to be trusted with the stories and the hard things that so many people were going through. And it took a huge toll on me too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I'm thinking, how it took a huge toll on you. I mean, in what ways did that happen? How did that really, I guess, transfer into your own, sense of self? How did that impact your own psyche as you had to be the person to support at that level the students at that time?
I think I think some of my communication skills improved, some probably worsened because so much of it was on Zoom. And I think it does take a little more, I think it takes a little more effort and energy to send empathy through a screen than in person. So I think I did improve my communication skills some. I think I really had to think also about my own. So I think probably, I'm guessing every working parent who has been responsible for their children at a time when they're also responsible for work can relate to this feeling that, like, when you have kids at home and you're working full time, you feel like you're not doing a great job at either. Mm-hmm. And so this thing where I had the law students really needing a lot of support, and there aren't, I'm in a unique role at the school. So was, felt like a big pull to try to, like, meet that need, connect students to resources. Then I had teenagers who were at home who had some hard stuff happening too. And I think that I think it's really hard to it was really unbalanced for a time. And then also at the end of a little, like, around the very very end of 2020, like personally, like one of, like, the best thing ever happened, which is I started a relationship with somebody I'd been friends with for a long time. And so it's, as somebody who for so long was like, oh sure, I can talk to you from 10:30 to 11:10 on next Thursday. Actually, around the very end of 2020, things slowed down. And to have this chance to, like, actually focus on a new relationship, like, at this point in life, and after some really 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 hard years, like, was like the greatest thing ever. So I have
Mm,
such, I feel like the like I feel so fortunate in terms of, like, what the pandemic did in terms of my life changing for the better. And so, and also don't want to in any way minimize how awful this has been. So
mhm,
we
mhm.
yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that just is kind of the complexity of this. It just is. I don't think there's, I think we all can experience the trauma and have good stuff. We can all experience the trauma and say, wow, this thing benefited me, or I came off better over here, but then this thing happened. And I think that it's just the complexity of being human. It's the grace that we have to give ourselves and others, and that's the biggest thing I think that we, had been missing. It really is missing generally. As I look at, every time I see them in the news, like there's these police cams and all these things that you keep saying, it's like the lack. You used the word earlier, this idea of dignity, right? Of leaving people with their dignity as they talk to you and share with you really tough times, hard things that they're going through. Meeting them with grace, saving, creating a safe space there for them. And as I just think overarchingly, we're not trained to do that. We're not raised to be those people, and so when you see how other people out in the world are treating other people, it's heart wrenching to me. I'm like, that is a human with a heartbeat. Like, they were put on this planet for some reason. I don't even care what your faith-based background is, right? It's like they're here, and you're doing that thing to them, just like the lack of showing dignity, and leaving people with dignity in interactions is just baffling to me. It's like it turns into my personal mission to help people see it. So number one, like, recognize that they're not seeing this person, no matter what their differences are. They're Republican, they're conservative, they're whatever, right? There's all these things, these labels that we put on them. But in the end, like, each person deserves dignity. And
Mhm.
it's so let's get to doing that. Let's do that. And it starts with listening, which is why you started it off. It's like creating that space of, like, truly leaning in and seeking to understand. Now, I know that when I think about all the people in the hospitals, the nurses, the doctors, the people who are here, it's receiving all of this, seeing all of this, the level of trauma that they're getting. And you've had a piece of that by just listening to all of the students and all of their trauma. You've had a piece of that. And just imagine, like, 20-fold the nurses who are right at the bedside of the people, their families that are there, right? Like that kind of thing. Putting ourselves in their shoes and saying, okay, gosh, what are the ways that we can listen to them and help them and show them some compassion, and them compassion, who are the people who are showing compassion every day.
Mhm.
It's a question I think we just need to ask ourselves on a broader scale. It's not just like, who do I owe this to, like my family and my friends, but it's like, how can I show up to be this person no matter who's around me? And if they are doing that to me, that means we're giving all of us are giving each other grace. We're all showing compassion. And what could the world be if we showed up to be those people
Yeah.
in aggregate? It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy to think about it.
Yep. Yep. I think there's this question too of your own capacity. And one of the most impactful things I've read recently, it's I think the author, I'm blanking, I think it's Terry Cole is her name, social worker, and talked about keeping a velvet rope around your inner circle, so that your inner circle is like a VIP section, and the folks who are in your inner circle are there based on how they treat you. So not what you think of them, not what you may want from them, nothing except how they treat you. And thinking about how I think so much of how we can show up for other people, it requires that we do hold some space for ourselves too, where
Mm,
we aren't being
mm, mhm.
I think it is we, something you said made me think too about how we will we'll minimize sometimes our own pain, because yes, there always, always, always are people who have it so much worse. And also your pain is real and you need to work through it so you can show up for other people. And I think part of that is not having folks who, just having some space in your home and in your, space for yourself to tune into your own needs and how you're doing. And
that's so true. I know. I think about, for me, it starts off at the beginning of the day, and if it can be whatever it is for whoever it's for, right? And however you need to, but setting aside that daily time is absolutely critical, and I've had to put limits on myself, because I get up and do a certain thing in the morning, but then I noticed I was using my phone to do it. And then I was like, wait a second. Then I'd see notifications pop up and it would distract me. And so I've started not to use my phone. I use my laptop. And then it's like, now I have a lot less distractions, because there's not things popping up when I'm doing, what I'm doing. So it's just interesting. You do have to do that, and you have to be really unwavering about that time for you. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Do you have any questions of me? I usually have this point where we turn it on me, and you can ask me a question before we wrap up. Is there anything that that you'd like to ask me, knowing the work I do? And I'd be happy to answer it.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. The first question that comes to mind is the question of, as I am, I'm transitioning out of my job at the University of Colorado Law School, which of course I care so deeply about, as I knew you do. And then I'm very excited about starting a law firm with my partner. I am curious I'm interested in what thoughts you have about transitioning out of a role where I feel like I did the best I could and didn't do what I'd hoped. Right. And I think one of the things about some roles, I think so I'm just interested, like, if you feel like, I am, any thoughts on that kind of transition, and some of the, the focus for that transition, instead of focusing on all the guilt or whatever feelings about not getting to everything.
Well, I would say that everything runs its course. And that we are where we're supposed to be, and the time we're there, like we're supposed to be doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're supposed to be done when we're done. And what you've accomplished, what I think is, I would say to you too, is don't underestimate the impact you had there. Sometimes we think we want to do this and that, but the impact we have is here, and it's actually much more profound than the thing we wanted to get done. And so, as I've heard you talk through it, I guarantee you, you had a tremendous impact on the students' lives, on their psyche, on their ability to just move forward day to day. That impact's way bigger than any program you could have put in place or any other thing that you may look at as legacy. The legacy that you leave on them is much bigger than any kind of program you can put in place, because number one, they multiply, because they go off, they get married, they have kids, they have businesses, they have, right? And so anything that you showed them or passed on to them is much more impactful. So I would say leave knowing that you did leave that positive impact. It's long lasting. And now it's on to the next thing. You're meant to be moving to the next stage now. And that's it. If you can hold on to that, I think you'll see that and you'll see, I bet you over the years, you'll leave and students will be reaching out to you, and you'll realize that your impact was vast.
That's a terrific answer. The two things that jump out to me about it are this idea of trusting that you're in the right place, trusting that it's run its course. And then you're so right that hopefully the legacy is the impact on the individuals I was able to help. It's not on the institution.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, think about it. When we think about like organizations, or you think about institutions, they're made up of people. I mean, really practically, they have walls. And if it's an entity, there are legal entities, right, that we've formed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you think about the institution, the culture, the feel of the institution, it's about the people that walk around the walls and the halls, right?
Mm-hmm.
They walk inside there. And so you have impacted the people that create the institutions. So I think you have an impact on the institution just by impacting the people inside. So it is long lasting, it is deep, it is big, and it will become more and more apparent to you as you move on and you get people reaching out to you. You'll be like, wow, okay. Heather was right. I had it. That was me.
Thank you.
It's awesome. All right. So for those who are listening, what might be like a pearl of wisdom or two you might leave them with? Some last things that, to kind of just help them recenter in the new year, as this will be coming out before that, just kind of keeping motivated to keep moving forward.
I would say to trust, to tune into your own instincts, and that so often the answer is actually to slow down rather than to try harder. So I would think about in the new year, like what is the more, what's the more caring, the more authentic you can be with yourself and what you really need, the better you're going to be at everything you do. So, and I think it sometimes, like you said, in answer to my question, I think like sometimes if you can't get motivated about something, that's not a problem. Like, and so getting interested, thinking about like, wait, why can't I get motivated? What is it that I can't get motivated about? Is it because this has run its course? Is it because there are some things I need to change about this? Is it something in my, just something in your life you need to change? I just have been reading some of the book Atomic Habits, and this idea that we fall to the level of our systems, right? So thinking about like, how's your space structured? How's your day structured? Like, and how does that work? Making that work for you is just always going to be better.
Mm. That's beautiful. There's so much for those who are listening, I don't know about you, there's so much just swirling around my head right now, and I'm feeling good too. So I have some like feeling good juices going on. I need to drink some water and get that in my pores now, get it in my muscles now. If you really enjoyed this time with me and Whiting, please do share this far and wide, because that is how we socialize the messages. We impact other leaders around the world by sharing. And then don't forget to go to Apple Podcast or wherever you might listen, and do write a review, because when you write the review, again, it kind of brings it up on the algorithm, and then people find us. We are in the top 100 around the world, actually, for management and leadership podcasts, which is kind of exciting. Trying to move it up, top 50, top 20, top right. But in the meantime, people are hearing this. So I appreciate all of you listening. And Whiting, this has been a pleasure. I am so glad I stuck with just continuing to try to reach out to you.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you. I appreciate this opportunity too. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening to Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.